I was 30 minutes away from signing over our $1.2 million house when my 16-year-old daughter texted me 3 words that stopped my hand. Mom, don't sign. I was sitting in my divorce lawyer Daniel's office with a black pen between my fingers. The settlement agreement was open in front of me. My name was printed at the bottom of the last page. And at 2:30 that afternoon, if I signed it, the house where my children had grown up would belong to my husband. I had spent the previous 6 months telling myself that was okay. Then my phone buzzed again. I found the payments. They started 3 months before Dad asked for the divorce. I read the message twice. Daniel was still talking about a provision concerning the retirement accounts when he noticed that I wasn't listening. He stopped. Everything okay? I turned my phone toward him. He read the 2 messages. His expression didn't become dramatic. Daniel wasn't that kind of person. He just went very still, took off his glasses, and looked at me. When did your husband file? He asked for the divorce in February. What date? February 17th. Daniel looked back at the screen. What payments? I don't know. Call her. She's at school. Then text her. Tell her I need to know exactly what she found before you sign anything. I looked at the clock. 2:17. 13 minutes until the appointment we'd scheduled for me to sign. For 6 months, I had been trying to get through this divorce without turning it into a war. Suddenly, I wasn't sure whether I had been protecting my peace or helping my husband get exactly what he wanted. I typed, "What payments, Emma? Where did you find them?" The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, then came back. Dad's bank account. I wasn't trying to snoop. I swear. I believed her. Emma wasn't the kind of kid who went digging through people's private things for entertainment. She was 16, yes, and 16-year-olds make questionable decisions, but she had never been careless with something this serious. Tell me everything. Her reply came in pieces. There are payments to a company called Northfield Advisory. Then, $4,800 every month. The first one was November 14th. I looked at Daniel. He was already writing the date down. November 14th, he said. I nodded. 3 months before the divorce. 3 months and 3 days, he said. That was when I felt the first real crack in the story Mark had been telling me. Not proof. Not yet. Just a crack. But it was enough to make me look at everything differently. For 22 years, Mark had been the person I thought I knew best. We met when we were 29. He made me laugh. He was patient when I wasn't. He could walk into a hardware store and somehow turn buying a light bulb into a 20-minute conversation with a complete stranger. We bought our house when we were 30. At the time, it was nowhere near worth $1.2 million. It was just an old 4-bedroom house with terrible orange kitchen cabinets, drafty windows, and a basement that flooded whenever we had a serious storm. We fixed it slowly, one project at a time. The kitchen, the roof, the basement, the deck. There were years when every extra dollar went into that house. Tyler learned to ride a bike in the driveway. Emma took her first steps in the living room. There were Christmas mornings, birthday parties, arguments over homework, Thanksgiving dinners where too many people sat around the table and someone always spilled something. That house was the one thing I had never imagined losing. And yet, I had agreed to give it to Mark. Not because I wanted to, because I was tired. 6 months earlier, Mark had told me our marriage was over. He said he'd been unhappy for years. He said I'd become distant, selfish, too focused on my career. He told his brother that I'd abandoned the family emotionally. He told 2 of our neighbors that I'd spent years putting work ahead of my husband and children. The worst part was that he told Emma I had changed, that I wasn't the same mother anymore. I knew what he was doing. At least, I thought I did. He was building a story in which the divorce was my fault. And because I didn't want our children dragged through a bitter divorce, I mostly kept my mouth shut. I didn't correct every rumor. I didn't call people and explain my side. I told myself that eventually the truth would matter more than the story. But when the settlement negotiations started, that silence became expensive. Mark wanted the house. His argument was simple. Emma was still in high school. Moving her would disrupt her life. He said the house should stay with whichever parent was providing stability. I remember sitting across from him during one of our early mediation sessions while he calmly explained why keeping the house was best for Emma. I almost laughed. Then I saw our daughter's face in my mind. She had already cried about the possibility of leaving her school, her friends, and the house she'd lived in since she was 4. So, I stopped fighting. Daniel had warned me that I didn't have to surrender my interest in the property, but I told him I didn't want another 18 months of legal battles. I could find another place. I could rebuild. I could replace furniture. I couldn't replace the years I was losing. So I agreed to a settlement that gave Mark the house. The house was valued at roughly $1.2 million. In return, I would receive other assets and a smaller portion of our investments. It wasn't the deal Daniel would have chosen for me, but it was the deal I could live with. Or so I thought. My phone buzzed again. Emma, there are more payments. December, January, February, March, April, May. Same company. Same amount. I stared at the screen. Daniel said, ask her whether the payments are actually from his personal account. I typed the question. She answered, yes. His checking account. The one we used for household stuff before the separation. Daniel leaned forward. Does your daughter have access to the account? No. And then how did she see the statements? I called her. She picked up immediately. Mom? Emma, slow down. Tell me exactly what happened. I was looking for the property tax file. Why? You asked me to find the folder on Dad's computer because you said you needed the old tax records for the lawyer. I remembered. I had asked her that morning. Okay. Dad wasn't home. His laptop was on the kitchen counter. The bank page was open. Did you open it? I saw the transaction list. I wasn't looking through his account. I just saw the company name. Her voice became quieter. Then I noticed he'd paid them before. How many times? I counted 7. Daniel held out his hand. I put the phone on speaker. Emma, he said, did you see anything that described what Northfield Advisory was being paid for? Any invoices? Emails? Not at first. Daniel looked at me. At first? Emma hesitated. I found one. What did it say? It wasn't an email. It was a PDF. My stomach tightened. What PDF? It said, Property Consulting Agreement. Daniel sat back. Property consulting? Yeah. With your father? I think so. What did it say? I asked. I didn't read the whole thing. I got scared. Because the address on it was ours. Nobody spoke for a moment. He was no longer taking notes casually. He was writing quickly. Emma, he said, did the document have a date? Yes. November 7th. Daniel stopped writing. I felt my stomach drop. November 7th. The first payment had been November 14th, 7 days apart. And I remembered November 7th. That was the day Mark told me he needed to get the house appraised. At the time, I hadn't thought anything of it. He'd walked into the kitchen while I was making dinner and said, I'm going to have someone come by next week to look at the house. For what? Refinancing, maybe? I had looked up from the cutting board. Why are we refinancing? We're not necessarily. I just want to know what it's worth. I shrugged. That was it. I forgot about it. Now, I couldn't. I asked Emma, did you see the appraisal? Anything else? A pause. Then she said, Mom, there's something else. I closed my eyes. What? I found a folder on Dad's desktop called Cedar. Daniel looked up. Cedar what? Just Cedar. What's inside? I don't know. I only saw the folder. Why not? Because I knew you'd freak out. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Yeah, I probably would. Emma took a breath. But I did see one file name. What file? There was another pause. Deed. I felt the room go quiet. Deed to what? The house. Daniel reached for his glasses. Ask her if she can send you a picture. I did. Emma said she could. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. The photograph was blurry. It showed part of a legal document on a laptop screen. Our address was visible. So was the name of an entity I'd never heard of. Cedar Ridge Holdings, LLC. Daniel studied the picture. That's interesting. What does it mean? It could mean several things. That's not reassuring. He zoomed in. There should be a recording date. I looked at the photograph. There was one. November 8th. One day after the property consulting agreement Emma had found. Could someone transfer the house without me knowing? He answered carefully. That's a legal question we'd need to verify with the actual recorded documents. But your name is on the deed, correct? Then I'm not interested in what Mark says he intended to do. I'm interested in what was actually filed. He turned his computer toward himself. Give me the address. He searched the property records. I watched his eyes move across the screen. Then he stopped. There's a filing. What kind? I need the document. He clicked. A few seconds passed. Then he said, This is a transfer document. I stared at him. Transfer of the house? It appears to be. Into Cedar Ridge? My mouth went dry. But I didn't sign anything. Are you certain? I need you to be absolutely certain. I would remember signing a document transferring my house. He nodded. He opened another screen. There's a signature attached. I leaned closer. My name was on it. For several seconds, I couldn't process what I was seeing. It looked like my signature, not vaguely, not approximately. It looked like mine. The same slant, the same looping capital letter, the same way I crossed the last letter of my last name. I whispered, I didn't sign that. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He was looking at the date. The day after Mark supposedly had a property consulting agreement. The day after he had started whatever process this was. And 6 days before the first payment. I thought about the previous 6 months. Mark telling me the divorce was because I had emotionally abandoned him. Mark insisting he needed the house because Emma needed stability. Mark telling everyone he had been unhappy for years. And all that time, there had been a company receiving $4,800 every month. I suddenly remembered another conversation. It had happened in January, about a month before Mark asked for the divorce. We were standing in the garage. He had been looking through a stack of papers. I asked him what he was doing. He said, trying to get our finances organized. I remember saying, since when? He smiled. Since I'm trying to be responsible. I had teased him about it. That's new? He laughed. I didn't think twice. Now I wondered what was in that stack of papers. My phone buzzed. Emma again. Mom, I found payment recipient. I read it aloud. Send me the screenshot. The payment wasn't simply listed as Northfield Advisory. Under the company name was an account reference, and next to it was a memo. PL Legal Services. Cedar. Daniel frowned. PL? Initials? Maybe. Emma texted again. There's a name on one of the documents, too. Patricia Lane. Daniel looked up sharply. Patricia Lane? You know her? Not personally. He pulled up the property filing. I watched him scan the page. She's the notary. I felt something shift inside me. So the same person who notarized the document transferring your house appears to be connected to the company receiving your husband's payments. That can't be a coincidence. I didn't say it was. He clicked through the document again. There's something else. The transfer lists consideration. How much? He turned the screen toward me. $10. I laughed once. It came out wrong. $10? Daniel didn't smile. The property wasn't necessarily sold for $10 in the conventional sense. This could be a transfer between related entities, and the legal significance depends on the documents and circumstances. My house is worth $1.2 million. I know, and there's a document saying it was transferred for $10. And I didn't sign it. I looked at the divorce agreement sitting on the desk. The agreement that would give Mark the house. The house that might already have been transferred somewhere else months earlier. I suddenly understood why Daniel had stopped trying to get me to calm down. He wasn't calm anymore either. I don't think you should sign anything today, he said. I wasn't planning to. Good. My phone rang. Mark. His name appeared on the screen. For 6 months, I had trained myself not to react whenever his name appeared. That afternoon, I couldn't stop staring at it. Daniel said, don't answer if you don't want to. I let it ring. It stopped. Then immediately rang again. I answered. Hello? Where are you? His voice sounded normal, almost annoyed. I'm with Daniel. I looked at the papers. I have a question about the house. Silence. Then Mark said, what about it? I heard something in his voice. Not guilt, not panic. Something more subtle. Caution. Did you ever hear of Cedar Ridge Holdings? There was a long pause. Long enough for me to know he'd heard the name before. Finally, he said, where did you get that? He was watching me carefully. I said, answer the question. Mark's voice changed. You've been going through my things. Then who has? I didn't answer. His breathing became heavier. Is Emma involved in this? That stopped me. He knew. Not necessarily what she found, but he knew she was involved. How do you know Emma found something? Another silence. Then he said, because she's 16 and she doesn't understand what she's looking at. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Then explain it to me. I will. When? Not over the phone. Because you're going to make a mistake if you sign nothing today. What mistake? Mark didn't answer. Mark? He hung up. I stared at the phone. Daniel said nothing for a few seconds. Then he asked, Did he know you were signing today? Did you tell him? Who else knew? My mediator. You, Mark. Daniel nodded. And Emma, apparently. I looked down at the divorce agreement. For months, I had believed Mark wanted the divorce because he didn't love me anymore. Maybe that was still true. Maybe it wasn't. But now there was a much bigger problem. Why had he started paying someone 3 months before he asked for the divorce? Why had he apparently begun arranging something involving our house before he told me our marriage was over? And why did the same name appear beside both? Daniel opened another document on his computer. I'm going to request the complete property record. Today? Today. He paused. But there's one thing I want you to do first. Call Emma. She answered almost immediately. Where are you now? Still at school. Did you open the Cedar folder again? There was a pause. Then I asked, Is there anything else you haven't told me? She was quiet. Emma? I didn't want to scare you. My heart sank. What did you find? I found a calendar. What calendar? Dad's. What about it? He had 3 dates marked. Which dates? I grabbed the edge of the desk. November 14th. And February 17th. The date Mark asked for the divorce. I whispered, What did he write? Emma's voice dropped. Nothing. What do you mean? There were just 3 letters next to each date. What letters? She hesitated, then said, CRH, Cedar Ridge Holdings. 3 dates. November 7th, November 14th, February 17th, the day the house paperwork started, the day the payment started, and the day Mark asked for the divorce. Daniel slowly closed the divorce agreement. He looked at me. Don't sign anything. But before I could say anything else, Emma sent one final photograph. It wasn't of a bank statement. It wasn't of the deed. It was a photograph of a handwritten note she had found inside the same folder. At the top was our home address. Underneath it was a sentence written in Mark's handwriting. I read it once, then again. And this time, I wasn't wondering why my husband wanted a divorce. I was wondering why he had been preparing for one before he ever told me. The note said, Once the transfer is complete, she won't have a claim on the house. For several seconds, nobody said anything. I kept staring at the note on my phone, reading the sentence over and over, until the words stopped looking like English. Daniel reached across the desk. Let me see that again. I handed him the phone. He studied the photograph Emma had taken, then enlarged the bottom half of the page. The handwriting was familiar enough that even I couldn't deny it looked like Mark's. Daniel tapped the screen. Where exactly did Emma find this? In a folder on Mark's laptop. Was the folder hidden? And she photographed the note herself. He nodded slowly. What did the folder contain? I looked at my daughter through the phone screen. She was still at school, sitting somewhere in the library, and I could hear other students talking faintly in the background. Emma, I said, I need you to tell me exactly what was in that folder. Don't open anything else. Just tell me what you already saw. I saw the deed thing, the Cedar Ridge folder, and the payment stuff. There was another folder inside it. What was it called? CRH. Daniel wrote it down. What did it contain? I asked. I only saw the names of the files. What names? She read them from memory. Transfer agreement, property valuation, and something called release. Daniel's pen stopped. Release? I looked at him. He didn't say anything. What's wrong? I asked. I don't know yet. That answer bothered me more than if he'd told me something frightening. Daniel had been practicing family law for more than 20 years. He had seen people lie about money, hide accounts, exaggerate debts, and manipulate property records. He wasn't easily rattled, but he was rattled now. Emma, he said, did you see a date on the transfer agreement? November 8th, the same date as the document we found? And the release? Okay, don't open the folder again. I won't. Her voice became smaller. Yeah? Are you mad at me? That question broke through everything else. Dad's going to be mad. I'll handle your dad. But I wasn't trying to. I looked down at the photograph. You did the right thing by telling me. Then she said, I just didn't understand why Dad had all that stuff about the house. Neither did I. But I was starting to understand one thing. The divorce hadn't begun when Mark told me he wanted out. Whatever this was, it had started earlier. Much earlier. I ended the call and sat back. Daniel placed my phone on his desk. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Has Mark ever asked you to sign anything concerning the house since November? I thought about it. At first, nothing came to me. Then I remembered a Friday evening in December. Mark had been sitting at the kitchen island with a stack of papers. He'd slid one toward me. Can you sign this? I hadn't even looked at the first page. What is it? Insurance paperwork. For the house? I had signed it. Or at least, I thought I had. Daniel noticed my expression. I signed something. December. Maybe early January. What kind of document? Mark said it was insurance-related. Did you read it? Daniel leaned back. Do you remember what the signature page looked like? Did he give you a copy? I don't remember. That was the first time I felt genuinely ashamed. Not because I had trusted my husband. Because I had trusted him so completely that I hadn't thought I needed to read what I was signing. I had been married to this man for 22 years. I knew his handwriting. I knew his passwords. I knew where he kept the spare keys. I knew he hated cilantro and loved old detective shows and would never admit that he sometimes cried during movies. I never imagined I might need to verify a document he put in front of me. Daniel said, "We're going to find out what that document was." How? First, I'm going to request the complete property record. Then we'll go through the documents you've signed during the separation. Can we get the original transfer? If it was recorded, we should be able to obtain a copy. If there's a signature attributed to you, I want to see the actual filing and whatever supporting paperwork was submitted with it. Then I remembered something else. Daniel? Yes? What if the transfer was real? What if I somehow signed something without understanding what it was? Then we figure out exactly what you signed and under what circumstances. And if I did, then we deal with it. He didn't make promises. I appreciated that. I had spent 6 months listening to people tell me what was going to happen. Mark told me I'd lose the house if I fought. His attorney told me the settlement was reasonable. Our mediator told me compromise was usually better for everyone. I didn't need another person telling me everything would be fine. I needed facts. Daniel opened a new email. Let's start with the payments. Your daughter said $4,800 a month. 7 payments? November through May? That's what she found. He wrote the dates down. December 14th, January 14th, February 14th, March 14th, April 14th, May 14th. Every month. Exactly $4,800. Except February. Daniel looked at the list again. February's payment. Your husband filed for divorce on February 17th. 3 days after the payment. That doesn't prove anything. But it's strange. He pulled up the bank information Emma had photographed. The account number is the same each time? Emma said so. I'd like the actual statements. I don't have access anymore. You don't need to. We can request financial disclosures from his side. Would that take weeks? Probably. I don't want to wait weeks. You may not have to. He opened the financial disclosures already exchanged during the divorce. Mark had listed his checking account. The account number matched the last 4 digits Emma had seen. Daniel scrolled through the records. Interesting. There's no mention of Northfield Advisory. Are you sure? How could he leave out 7 payments? Daniel shook his head. He clicked into the monthly expense disclosures. There were mortgage payments, utilities, insurance, credit cards, car expenses. Nothing resembling a $4,800 monthly consulting payment. What if he paid them from another account? I asked. That's possible. But Emma saw the payments from this account. Right. So he didn't disclose them. Not that we can see. I sat there quietly. For months, Mark had accused me of hiding money. During mediation, he had repeatedly said he didn't trust my financial disclosures. I remembered sitting across from him while he told the mediator, I just want everything to be transparent. At the time, I had wanted to scream. Now I wondered whether he'd been projecting. Daniel printed the financial disclosure. He circled the account. This is important. Because if these payments exist and weren't disclosed, I want to know what they were for before you agree to anything. Mom. I remembered something. I opened it. Dad told me last year that the house would always be mine. I stared at the message. Then another arrived. He said nobody could make me leave because it was in my name too. Did Emma ever have ownership? Not that I'm aware of. I showed him the messages. He read them carefully. That may just have been something he told her to reassure her. But the timing bothered me. The appraisal. The transfer document. November 14th. The first $4,800 payment. And sometime around then, Mark had apparently told our daughter she had nothing to worry about because the house would always be hers. I remembered that conversation. Emma had mentioned it at dinner. I'd been distracted and barely listened. Mark had looked across the table at her and said, "Whatever happens, this is your home." I thought he'd been trying to comfort her. Maybe he had. Or maybe he knew something I didn't. Daniel was still looking at the photograph. "There's one thing I want to check. The LLC." He searched the state business registry. Cedar Ridge Holdings LLC had been formed on November 5th, 3 days before the property transfer. Who owns it? Daniel clicked. The information was limited. Registered agent is a company. Can we see the owner? Not from this filing. Then how do we find out? We follow the paperwork. He clicked through the business filing history. There was one amendment. Filed in January. The registered office changed. To where? He read the address. I recognized it. I had seen it before. Not on a legal document. On an envelope. I thought about it for several seconds. That's Patricia Lane's address. You're sure? Where did you see it? On a letter Mark received. Maybe January. What kind of letter? Did you see the return address? Yes, I remember because it wasn't a business-looking envelope. Where did Mark keep it? In his office. I swallowed. Daniel, I think I know where that office is. My house had a small office off the back hallway. Mark used it more than I did. During the separation, he'd started locking the door. He said he needed privacy for work. I hadn't questioned it. That suddenly seemed ridiculous. I stood. Where are you going? I want to go home. Absolutely not alone. I wasn't going to confront him. I just want to see if the paperwork is still there. Daniel considered it. If Mark is home, don't go through his things. If you're concerned about your safety, don't go. I don't think he'll hurt me. I wasn't asking about violence. I stopped. I mean, if he's been preparing documents for months, there's a possibility he'll destroy them once he realizes you found them. That hadn't occurred to me. And suddenly, neither of us wanted me walking into the house and announcing that I knew. Daniel said, "Call Emma. Ask whether Mark is home." "He's not," she said. "How do you know?" "He texted me. He's going to the bank." "Which bank?" Emma told me. It was the same bank where Mark's checking account was held. Daniel and I exchanged a look. I asked Emma one more question. Did Dad say why? Then she added, "Mom?" He also asked me something weird yesterday. He asked if you were planning to move. What did you tell him? That I didn't know. I ended the call. Daniel stood. "We're going to your house." The drive took 20 minutes. Neither of us talked much. I kept thinking about the last 6 months. The arguments. The accusations. The way Mark had suddenly become protective of the house. The way he'd insisted the divorce was about our marriage. Maybe it was. But there was another possibility now. Maybe the house had been part of the plan from the beginning. When we arrived, the driveway was empty. I unlocked the door. The house looked exactly the same. That was almost insulting. The same shoes by the entryway. The same bowl of keys. The same photograph of the 4 of us from Emma's 8th grade graduation. My marriage was falling apart, yet the house still looked like a family lived there. Daniel followed me to the office. The door was locked. "I don't have a key." "Do you know where he keeps one?" "In the kitchen junk drawer." I found it under batteries and takeout menus. The lock clicked. Mark's office smelled like coffee and the cedar cleaner he always used on the desk. His laptop wasn't there, but the filing cabinet was. Daniel opened the top drawer. Nothing. Second drawer. Old tax returns. Insurance documents. Receipts. Third drawer. Empty. I opened the bottom drawer. A brown envelope sat underneath a stack of folders. My name was written across it. I froze. Daniel noticed. "Don't touch it yet." He took a photograph of the envelope, then carefully opened it. Inside was a document. Not the transfer. Something older. A property valuation. The date was October 29th. Almost 2 weeks before the first transfer paperwork. The appraised value of the house was listed as $1.18 million. Close enough to explain the $1.2 million figure we'd been using. But at the bottom of the valuation was a handwritten note. Daniel read it. Then he looked at me. He turned the page around. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Marks. Need this value before November 7th. Confirm with PL. I stared at the initials. PL. Patricia Lane. The person connected to Northfield. The person whose address had become the registered office for Cedar Ridge Holdings. And the person whose name appeared on the transfer paperwork. But then Daniel found something else. Tucked behind the appraisal was a copy of a bank wire confirmation. The amount was $4,800. The date was November 14th. The recipient was Northfield Advisory. And in the reference field was one word. Escrow. Escrow for what? He turned the page over. There was an attachment. A handwritten account number. And underneath it, another name. Not Mark's. Not mine. Not Patricia Lane's. It was Emma's. I stared at my daughter's name. For the first time since this started, I couldn't find an innocent explanation. Daniel picked up the document. This is what we need to understand. Why would Emma's name be on an escrow document? Could it be something for her college? Possibly. But Mark never mentioned an account. I looked at the date. The first payment. The same week he'd started moving something involving our house. Then I noticed another line. A beneficiary designation. My daughter wasn't simply listed. She was listed as the beneficiary. Why would he transfer the house away from me and put Emma on something connected to the money? Daniel didn't answer. He was reading the document again. Then his phone rang. He stepped into the hallway to answer it. I stayed at the desk. My eyes kept returning to Emma's name. A few minutes later, Daniel came back. Who was that? The county records office. And? They found the original filing. Does it have my signature? I felt sick. But there's something else. The signature was witnessed. By Patricia Lane. By Mark. That doesn't make sense. He handed me the photocopy. At the bottom were two signatures. Mine and Mark's. Except Mark's signature was labeled Witness. I looked at my own signature again. Then something caught my attention. The date beside my signature wasn't November 8th. It was October 29th, the exact same date as the property valuation. My signature was supposedly put on this document before the transfer was even filed. But I wasn't there. And there's another problem. He pointed to the bottom of the document. The notary's commission date. I read it. Then I looked at him. Patricia Lane's notary commission had expired before this document was supposedly notarized. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. The room was silent, except for the ticking wall clock. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Mom, Dad just called me. Another message came immediately after it. He asked if I still had the pictures. He knows. Daniel's face tightened. I typed back. What did you say? Emma answered. I told him no. Mom, I lied. A third message appeared. I still have everything. Before I could respond, another message arrived. This one contained a photograph. It was a picture of the inside of the cedar folder. There was one document I hadn't seen before. At the top was the same address as our house. Beneath it was a date, October 29th. And underneath that, in Mark's handwriting, was a heading that made me stop thinking about the divorce altogether. Contingency plan, Emma. For a few seconds, I just stared at the words on Emma's screen. Contingency plan sounded like something you wrote when you expected something to go wrong. What does that mean? I don't know yet, he said. But the date matters. The same date as the property valuation. The same date that appeared on the document we had just found in Mark's office. Daniel took the phone from me and enlarged the photograph. Can Emma send us the entire page? Emma, I need the full document. Don't open anything new, just photograph the pages you've already seen. She sounded nervous. I'm here. Is Dad in trouble? That was the honest answer. Emma was quiet for a moment. Do you think he did something bad? I didn't know how to answer that either. So I said, I think your dad has been keeping things from me. That was the first time I said it out loud. Not to Daniel, not to myself, to my daughter. And somehow, saying it made it more real. A minute later, 3 photographs came through. The first was the heading. The second showed several paragraphs beneath it. The third showed a table with dates, amounts, and names. Daniel and I read it together. The first paragraph wasn't what I expected. It said, if the transfer is completed before December 30th, The property will be held for Emma until she reaches 25, subject to the terms of the trust agreement. A trust? Apparently. I kept reading. The next section listed expenses, taxes, maintenance. Then came the part that made me stop. Funding for the trust will be maintained through the Northfield account until the property transfer is finalized. I pointed at the screen. The payments. That appears to be the connection. I sat down. So Mark wasn't paying someone for the divorce. Not exactly. Then what was he paying for? Looks like legal and administrative work related to the property. I looked at the $4,800 payments again. 7 months, $33,600. I couldn't understand why he had gone through all of this in secret. Then I saw another line. Primary beneficiary, Emma. My daughter. Not Mark. Not me. For the first time since this started, the story in my head shifted. Maybe Mark wasn't trying to take the house from me so he could keep it. Maybe he had been trying to move it somewhere neither of us could easily control. But that didn't explain the divorce. And it didn't explain the lies. Daniel seemed to be thinking the same thing. There's more, he said. At the bottom of the page was a note. Do not finalize transfer until marital settlement is executed. I read it twice. Then I understood the significance. The divorce settlement was not an afterthought. It was part of the plan. My hands tightened around the phone. He wanted me to sign the divorce agreement first, so that I wouldn't have a claim on the house. But then, why put the house in a trust for Emma? That is the question. I stared at the document. For 6 months, I'd believed Mark wanted the house because he was selfish. Maybe he was. But if he had wanted the house for himself, why go through the trouble of putting it aside for our daughter? There had to be something else. I called Emma again. Did you see anything about why Dad was doing this? Anything about money? There's another folder. Of course there was. What folder? It was next to the Cedar folder. It says Northfield. Daniel immediately sat forward. Emma, don't open it. I already did. Okay, Daniel said carefully. Don't change anything. Just tell us what you saw. It's mostly invoices. I don't know. Legal stuff. There's one from October. What does it say? She read it. Asset protection and estate planning. Daniel and I looked at each other. $9,600. That was a number I recognized. I had seen a $9,600 charge in our financial records months earlier. I had assumed it was related to Mark's business. I suddenly remembered asking him about it. He had said, it's a tax thing. I hadn't pressed him. Now I wished I had. Emma, I said, is there an invoice from November? What does that one say? She read slowly. Property restructuring. Daniel reached for a pen. Amount? $14,400. I felt dizzy. So, that's why he started paying them before the divorce, I said. Likely. But likely wasn't enough. I wanted to know why. I wanted to know what had happened on October 29th that made Mark suddenly start planning around our house. Then Emma said something that changed the entire direction of the story. There are documents from Dad's company, too. What company? The company he owns with his brother. I knew about Mark's business. He had a small commercial construction company with his younger brother, Paul. It wasn't enormous, but it had done well over the years. Mark had always told me it was stable. A few employees. Good contracts. Nothing I needed to worry about. What documents? Loan papers. Ask her what kind. There's a loan for almost $900,000. $875,000. Daniel slowly sat back. I felt like I'd been punched. Was that loan for the house? Emma continued looking through the photographs. Then she said, wait, there's another page. She sent it. Daniel opened the photograph. I saw Mark's company name, then a line beneath it. Personal guarantor, Mark Ellison. And below that, collateral, Cedar Ridge property. I didn't understand immediately. Then I did. The house? Our house. Mark had apparently used the house as collateral for an $875,000 business loan. My voice came out almost as a whisper. He put our house up for his company. Daniel nodded grimly. That's what this appears to show. I stood up. He told me the company was doing fine. Maybe it was when he told you. When was this loan? Daniel checked the date. October 18th. 11 days before the property valuation. 11 days before the contingency plan. And almost a month before the first payment. I sat back down. Suddenly, small moments from the last year came rushing back. Mark sitting at the kitchen table late at night with his laptop open. His phone calls in the garage. The sudden insistence that we couldn't afford to renovate the downstairs bathroom. The conversation about refinancing. His questions about whether I would be willing to simplify the property situation if we ever separated. At the time, I thought he was talking about the divorce. Maybe he had been talking about the loan. Daniel was reading the document carefully. There's a problem. The loan date is October 18th, but this says the property was being transferred into Cedar Ridge after the loan. I didn't understand. It means we need the original loan agreement. Because if the house was used as collateral while it was still jointly owned, we need to know exactly what Mark signed and what the lender believed about ownership. Could he have done this without me? Daniel chose his words carefully. Don't assume anything yet. We need the actual documents. But my mind had already gone somewhere else. If Mark's company had an $875,000 loan secured against our house, then the $1.2 million value suddenly made sense. There was roughly $325,000 of value left after that debt, before considering the mortgage and other costs. That wasn't the same house I thought I owned. It was a house carrying a secret debt. Did Mark want the divorce because of the loan? I can't tell you that yet. But the timing, is significant. I stood and walked toward the window. For 22 years, I had thought our house represented security. Now, I was realizing Mark had turned it into something else. A financial guarantee. A bargaining chip. Maybe even a way to save his business. Then I remembered something he had said during our first mediation session. He'd looked at me and said, "You don't understand how much is at risk if we drag this out." I thought he meant our marriage. Maybe he meant the company. I turned around. What happens if his company defaults? Daniel didn't answer immediately. That's something we need to investigate. And the house? That's exactly why you should not sign the settlement. There was no chance I was signing it now. But there was still one question I couldn't get past. Why had Mark told everyone I was the reason for the divorce? If the real problem was his business, why not tell me? Daniel said, "There's probably something we're missing." He was right. We found it in the last page of the Northfield folder, a letter dated October 2007. It was from an attorney, not Patricia Lane, a different lawyer. The letter was addressed to Mark. I read it slowly. It explained that his personal guarantee on the business loan could expose his personal assets if the company failed. It recommended restructuring certain assets and establishing a trust for Emma. But one sentence caught my attention. Any transfer of the marital residence must be handled carefully and should not be represented as an attempt to defeat an existing creditor claim. Daniel stopped reading. Because it means whoever advised Mark knew the timing mattered. I stared at the date. October 27th. 2 days before the property valuation. 8 days before the Cedar Ridge entity was created. And 3 weeks before the first payment. So he knew the house was at risk. And he created a plan to protect it for Emma. That's what the documents suggest. I looked at the note again. For 6 months, I had assumed she meant me because Mark wanted the house. But now I wondered if the sentence meant something else. He needed me to give up my marital claim so the property could be placed into the trust. He wasn't trying to keep it. He was trying to keep it out of the reach of his creditors. That didn't excuse what he did. But it explained the strange pieces. The payments. The trust. The LLC. The divorce. They weren't separate. They were one plan. And I still didn't know why Mark had chosen to lie to me instead of telling me the truth. Then we heard the front door open. Mark was home. I hadn't even heard his car. Stay here. Footsteps came down the hallway. Mark appeared in the doorway. Then at Daniel. Then at the papers spread across his desk. His face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. You weren't supposed to find those. You put our house up as collateral for an $875,000 loan. He closed his eyes. For the first time in 6 months, he looked genuinely exhausted. I waited. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought I could fix it. That doesn't answer the question. I didn't want you to panic. I laughed quietly. You told everyone I was selfish. You told Emma I'd abandoned the family. You asked for a divorce 3 months after you started paying lawyers to move our house. The divorce was part of it. The room went silent. Daniel said, "Explain." Mark rubbed both hands over his face. The company was in trouble. I knew there had to be more. How much trouble? Bad enough that I thought we'd lose everything. One of our biggest contracts collapsed. We were already carrying the loan. Then the client sued. He nodded slightly. Mark continued. I was personally guaranteeing the debt. If the company failed, they could come after me. And the house. That's why Cedar Ridge. That's why Northfield? Then why did you make me believe I was the reason for the divorce? He looked away. I thought if you hated me, you'd stop fighting me. I felt something inside me crack. You wanted me to hate you? I needed you to sign. So you made me the villain. I didn't think it would go this far. I couldn't help it. I laughed. You told our daughter I abandoned her. His face tightened. I was angry. No, you were scared. He didn't deny it. Daniel asked, why Emma? Mark looked at him. Because if something happened to me, she needed a home. He turned toward me. That house was supposed to go into a trust for her. I looked down. The words on the document finally made sense. Contingency plan? Emma? It wasn't a plan to take the house away from her. It was a plan to make sure she never lost it. But there was still something I couldn't forgive. You could have told me. You could have asked me to help. I thought you'd leave. You were already leaving me. He looked at the floor. I didn't know how to tell you I had put our home at risk. That was the truth I hadn't expected. Not a secret lover. Not another family. Not some elaborate scheme to steal the house. Fear. Bad decisions. And a man who thought he could solve a massive financial problem by controlling everyone around him. I asked, did you ever actually want a divorce? He took a long breath. I wanted you to sign the agreement. That isn't what I asked. The word was quiet. I didn't want a divorce. I felt strangely empty. Then why? Because the attorneys told me the cleanest way to separate your interest from the property was through the divorce settlement. Daniel immediately corrected him. That's not the same as saying the divorce itself was legally required. Mark nodded. I know that now. He said, there are other ways this could have been structured, but what Mark did was extremely risky, and I wouldn't have advised you to sign anything without full disclosure. I turned back to Mark. Did you know the notary's commission had expired? Daniel stepped in. Then we have another issue. The transfer document appears defective. Mark stared at him. I mean, the document may not have been properly notarized. I watched Mark's face. He looked genuinely shocked. I didn't know that. That mattered, because it meant Mark hadn't controlled every part of this plan. He had trusted other people, and some of those people had made mistakes, possibly very serious ones. Daniel gathered the documents. I am going to request the complete loan file, the trust documents, the Northfield invoices, and every property filing. Until then, nobody signs anything. He didn't argue. For the first time, we were sitting at the same table without pretending. Then Emma walked through the front door. She had gotten a ride home from school. She stopped when she saw her father. Dad? Mark looked at her. She looked scared. He stood. Emma, I'm sorry. She didn't move. Did you lie to Mom? Heart swallowed. Because I was trying to protect you. Emma looked at me. Then back at him. You made Mom think she was the bad guy. Mark's eyes dropped. Emma wiped her face. You could have just told us. I should have. She didn't hug him. She didn't scream. She just walked upstairs. And somehow, that was worse. The divorce did not happen that day. Neither did the transfer. Daniel filed objections to the proposed settlement and began reviewing the property documents. Over the next several weeks, the picture became clearer. Mark's company really had been in financial trouble. The $875,000 loan was real. The house had been offered as collateral without my informed consent. Northfield Advisory had been coordinating the restructuring and trust work. The $4,800 payments were legitimate professional fees, although Mark had hidden them from me. The Cedar Ridge LLC had been created as the vehicle for holding the property. And Emma was named as beneficiary because Mark wanted the house protected for her if the business failed or something happened to him. The biggest misunderstanding had been the word transfer. Mark thought he could transfer the house, complete the divorce settlement, and move it into the trust before the company's problems became public. He believed that would protect Emma. Instead, he created a legal mess that could have cost all of us the house. And his decision to hide everything from me made it look like something far worse. As for the divorce, I didn't stay married to him. That part surprised people. Once the truth came out, some family members expected me to forgive him. After all, he hadn't been secretly building a second family. He hadn't wanted to steal the house. He had been trying, badly, to protect our daughter. But intention doesn't erase what you do to somebody. For 6 months, Mark had made me question my own character. He had told our children things that weren't true. He had asked me to surrender a major financial asset without telling me about the debt attached to it. And he had decided that I didn't deserve to know because he thought he knew what was best. I couldn't build another marriage on that. So, we divorced. The final agreement looked very different from the one I had almost signed. The house stayed out of Mark's personal control while the financial issues were sorted out. Eventually, after the business debt was resolved through a negotiated sale of several company assets, the remaining equity in the house was divided fairly. I didn't get everything. Neither did Mark. But I did not sign away my claim. And Emma's future in the house was protected through a proper legal arrangement that both of us understood, and that I had actually agreed to. The house eventually became Emma's home in a very different way. Not because her father secretly arranged it behind my back. Because we both chose it. Months later, I was cleaning out the old office when I found the original handwritten note. The same one that had started all of this. I almost threw it away. Instead, I sat at the desk and read it again. For months, I had read those words as proof that Mark wanted to take something from me. Now I understood what he had been trying to say. He wanted to remove my claim because he believed that was the only way to protect the house for Emma. He was wrong about how to do it. He was wrong to lie. He was wrong to make me the villain. But he wasn't trying to take our daughter's home. He was trying to save it. That didn't make everything okay. It just made the truth more complicated than the story I had been telling myself. A year after the divorce, Emma and I were sitting on the back deck. She was doing homework. I was drinking coffee. The house was quiet. She looked at me and said, "Do you still hate Dad? Do you love him?" I smiled a little. "That's a different question." She nodded. Then she went back to her homework. A few minutes later, she said, "I'm glad you didn't sign." I looked at her. So am I. Because that was the real lesson I took from all of it. Not that every secret means someone is betraying you. Not that every divorce has a hidden villain. And not that you should assume the worst about someone you've loved for 22 years. It was simpler than that. When the person you built your life with asks you to sign away something important, you deserve to understand exactly what you're signing. You deserve the truth before you make a decision. And sometimes, the most important thing you can do is put the pen down. I'm glad my daughter gave me 13 minutes. Those 13 minutes didn't save my marriage. They didn't erase what Mark had done. But they gave me enough time to ask the questions I should have been asking all along. And they kept me from signing away my home before I knew whose future I was actually signing it away for.